Welcome back and many thanks for staying with us right here on NTV Uganda. You're watching NTV Weekend Edition and it's time for us to take a look at Talk of the Nation, readiness for the schools as they reopen for the year. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has created challenges for all categories of investors. Those in the school industry have not been spared with either, as the challenges of the COVID-19 restrictions continue to bite. Now, while the Minister of Education and Sports has been at pains, or laboring to deny any plans of an imminent resumption of the schools, there are concerns about the preparedness of the learners and the teachers when the schools reopen. Now, to talk about this and more, I'm privileged to be joined by PATRICK Kaboyo, the General Secretary of the Federation of Non-State Education Institutions, an organ representing private school owners. He joins us now on Talk of the Nation. A very good evening, sir.
Good evening, Romeo, and good evening to our viewers.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Now, help us understand, what do the learners and teachers have to do to ensure a smooth restart of the schools, if government permits this process to go ahead?
Thank you. It's our prayer that government permits, and this ought to have come yesterday, because since June, we have had series of meetings, including those high-level meetings, bringing on board different players.
Yes.
Religious leaders, Uganda Joint Christian Council, Muslim Association. And the consensus was and still remains that schools should open, because on the scale of 1 to 10, we are 9% ready. And this comes to ensure that parents should not fear, because there are forces of negative energy trying to create fear, even confusing the president, because there are some few pockets which are coming up at this time. Even some of those were in meetings that were held. But the issue here is response and compliance to the SOPs that are talked about.
Break them down for us.
Breaking them down, I'm here, I've not worn a mask because I have to speak to the audience.
But there's social distancing?
Yes, but I have my mask and there's social distancing. It means, therefore, that schools have to adapt to a new culture of having every student wear the mask. But this has to come from home. It means that a school should be able to have water. And this calls for a paradigm shift from the usual normal to ensuring that if schools have no harvesting mechanisms, that water should be harvested. It should just be collected and not to be left to run away. Soap should be at school in terms of buying bar soap, and also hygiene in terms of how these children manage their personal hygiene, including toilet manners, etiquette, and how they manage their urinals. But also this should be incumbent upon every school administrator and teacher to take this as a new thing that is not going to remain, and also to sound a clarion call that we cannot keep closed for long. So there has to be an opening to enable us to know at what level we are supposed to move, and this can be a baseline. Of course, we cannot remain closed and when many children are getting disoriented.
Of course, but can you see schools reopening in this era of COVID-19, Mr. Patrick?
We do not know who brought COVID, and we do not know when it will end. So we cannot keep schools closed, for instance, for 2 years, because scientists have it that even to the end of 2021, COVID will still be with us. So we have to cope, be strict with the mechanisms of how we are going to live, be creative enough, but also improve on our communication. Communication to parents, communication to teachers, communication to the students themselves, including those that are listening to me right now in their homes, in their sitting rooms. That's not a matter of news per se, but it's a matter of what they learn in school in a subject called biology or science. So they have to put it into practice and know that if you don't maintain proper hygiene, if you do not wear the mask, you will be exacerbating the cause.
Indeed, Mr. Kaboyo, Patrick, it's one thing to talk about the problem and it's another to offer recommendations. So what advice do you have to, for government on whether to reopen or call for a dead year?
There can't be dead year business or talk at this time. What we are looking at is progression. What we are looking at is hope. And what we are looking at is to put a stop on the pessimists those who are speculating, those who are confusing the public, the position from the COVID task force and the committee that I sit on is that schools should be open. And we commit and pledge compliance to the SOPs. As a federation of non-state education institutions, we are in talks to ensure that should there be schools in the rural areas that are hard up in terms of compliance, by the end of September, we shall be discussing on how to give a small support in terms of what to start with. There could be bars of soap, sanitizers. But I want to say authoritatively on this that we are in talks as leaders in the sector.
Amazing. And
schools have to open.
Indeed. It's been a short but very insightful conversation. Thank you very much, Mr. Kaboyo Patrick.
Most welcome.
And you're still watching NTV Weekend Edition. Let's take another short break. We'll be right back with sports.